YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I am going to review Captain Marvel. I really liked this movie, can't wait to talk all about it, but first I will get the spoiler warning out of the way. Of course, spoilers for this entire movie, but also some minor spoilers for Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, as this movie ties to both of those in small ways. Also, some small spoilers for Captain America the Winter Soldier, probably. But with that out of the way, let's get into the review. Okay, so as I just said, I really enjoy this movie. I have liked it more with each viewing since the first time I watched it. I think, like a lot of people, the very first time I watched this movie, it was between Infinity War and Endgame, and it wasn't very satisfying compared to the, epic and grand scale of both of those movies. Not that I think it ever should have tried to be, but it's just when you're just watching Infinity War and you're like, man, this is going to be big, this is going to be important. And then you watch this movie, it's like, okay, yeah, it's it doesn't really fill the void of that sandwich, if you get what I mean. But now that I've rewatched it a number of times, separated from those two movies and just tried to enjoy it as a movie, I found myself really enjoying it. I just like it. It's fun. I really connected with the main character of Carol Danvers. The fact that she only has memories from the last 6 years of her life and everything else is a bit, spotty from there. And the fact that she's being brainwashed by Yon-Rogg into suppressing her human nature, into suppressing her memories and not trying to remember and just focusing on moving forward and only acting in a logical, emotionless way is really challenging and really tough for her character. And I really like seeing her go on this journey where she learns to embrace her human nature, learns to embrace those emotions and rely on them. And that's just really cool. And I really like Carol Danvers in this film. But speaking of her journey, I'll talk about the plot here for a bit. I really love how she gets stranded on Earth away from the Kree Empire and everything she knows from the last 6 years. But then she slowly realizes that she's more connected to Earth than she ever thought possible. I love how she forms a friendship and bond with Nick Fury. Their banter together is hilarious and it feels very natural and normal. Definitely one of the strengths of this film. I love her discovering her hidden heroic backstory of flying a mission with Mar-Vell to stop the faster-than-light engine from falling into the wrong hands, and her choice to blow up the engine, which might inadvertently kill her, but if that's her last act, that's what she has to do. So it's really cool seeing her kind of discover and slowly unravel this mystery of her life here on Earth. Of course, as a comic book fan, I knew that, we all know that's where she's from, and we all know greater connections and stuff, and they were giving plenty of flashbacks. But I still appreciated the slow reveal of her backstory. It never felt like it was drawn out just for the sake of being drawn out. It always felt like they were giving us more and more with each consecutive place that they visited. And in particular, I liked the scene where she sees the photo of herself surrounding the Pegasus Project. And you just see this crestfallen look on her face where you can tell this is really eating her up. This is really causing her to question everything. But she's trying to follow the misguided training of Yon-Rogg and be emotionless. She's trying not to let it affect her. And I really like that scene because of that. So, yeah. And then at the end, after she's been given conflicting information from both the Kree and the Skrulls through the black box and stuff, I love that it's her best friend, Maria Rambeau, that gives her that push to know who she is and to trust that she is Carol Danvers and that she needs to do the right thing. And then it's very gratifying to see her use her power to its full extent and stop the Kree from destroying or hurting Earth, and to start helping the Skrulls and be on the, quote, right side of the war. And I just really appreciate that. So that sums up my feelings on the plot and Captain Marvel specifically, but let's talk about some of the other characters. Starting with Nick Fury, I really enjoyed Nick Fury in this movie. Again, I don't think it's as strong of a performance or as cool of a character showing as, Captain America the Winter Soldier, but he's still really cool in this film, and I enjoy that he got to be the goofy one in this movie. Typically, he's the serious, super stiff type compared to the other superheroes around him, but because Captain Marvel was the serious type in this movie, he got to be the goofy one, and that was very funny to see kind of all his shenanigans and banter with Captain Marvel. Very, very well done. And again, as mentioned, I really appreciated his friendship with Carol. I will briefly mention here that I don't like that Fury loses his eye in a joke to some silly space cat. However, I talk about this at length in my previous video, which I will link right here, talking about my problems with this movie as it relates to the wider MCU. So watch that video to hear me rant all about Nick Fury losing his eye. But otherwise, I'll simply say I didn't love it for this film. And yes, it's because of the line he says in Winter Soldier. But I'll leave you to watch that video. Quick side note that I didn't bring up in that other video, though, is had Nick Fury lost his eye in a satisfying way to a Skrull that Carol forewarned him about, I think this would help the overall story because it would cause Carol to kind of regress a little bit. She's starting to open up. She's starting to think maybe I should listen to my emotions. But then she sees Nick Fury, a man who listens to his emotions, who embraces his humanity, lose his eye because of that humanity. And she decides, oh, I've got to double down. I've got to not embrace my emotions. I cannot embrace my humanity. I've got to suppress that because elsewise I could lose an eye just like he did. And I think that would have served the story a little bit better. But again, I digress. This is the movie we have, and this is what I get to review. I want to talk about Yon-Rogg because he's the other big character in this movie. I liked his character and I liked the role he fulfilled in this movie, but I'm really kind of frustrated with him because I don't think they wrote him or directed him as well as he could have been. Because his whole thing is that he wants Carol to be emotionless. He wants her to suppress her human side. And he wants her to just be cold and logical. And yes, large part of this is because he's trying to control her. He's trying to stop her from finding out the real history, that it was the Kree that shot at her, not the Skrulls. They altered her memories and stuff. But still, it bothers me because I think it would have been a more powerful message had Yon-Rogg been cold and logical himself. I mean, imagine if he acted this way. He was a character that only acted on logic, who rarely smiled and never laughed, and was just a, by the book, I mean business type of guy. I think that would be a stronger argument for his claim to say, hey, suppress your emotions, don't do it, because he's right. He's living proof that it works, or at least that there are some benefits to it. In their sparring match at the beginning of the movie, instead of him straining and smiling and laughing with Veers, he could just be calm, collected, not even breaking a sweat, only moving his body when he needs to, and just calmly deflecting each of Carol's attacks. To be fair, the movie already does this, but he has a lot more emotion that shows on his face in these matches, which just bothers me. And I get what they were going for was the hypocrisy. Yon-Rogg is telling her to get on her emotions, then he's very emotional himself. But I still feel like you could have accomplished this in other ways, and it would have been better if he showed her the path of this is what cold calculating logic does for you, and this is the benefits of it. And furthermore, I'd take this a step further, and when the squad faces the Skrulls for the first time on planet Torfa or whatever, have them go up against overwhelming odds of Skrulls and have Yon-Rogg, who's not intimidated, who doesn't let fear cross his mind whatsoever, take them all out coldly, ruthlessly, and effectively because he stayed calm in the heat of battle where the other Kree soldiers did not. And again, it shows off how the benefits of being logical. That I feel like would be more powerful. And like I said, you could still have the hypocrisy. Make the rest of the squad emotional. Minerva already basically is this way in the show. She's the female sniper. She tells Captain Marvel flat out, I hated you. That's someone leading by her emotions, and Yon-Rogg doesn't get after her whatsoever. And that's okay. Keep that hypocrisy. Veers is the only one singled out, but make Yon-Rogg a more compelling character by having him live and practice what he preaches. I think that would have just been better for the story overall. But then as the movie progresses, you could still show the detriments of this mentality of only acting on logic, not letting your emotions get in the way, because you could have Yon-Rogg not really thinking there's a problem with Carol being on Earth. He's like, it's fine. It won't cause any issues. She will stick to the mission. Whereas the rest of his squad, who are leading by their emotions, could be like, are you kidding me? This is a terrible idea. She's going to turn on us. There's going to be issues. We need to put her down. And Yon-Rogg, because he's logical oriented, is like, well, until we know more, we're going to act as if she's still on our side. And if he just listened to his Kree buddies, he might have been able to stop her, but as it stands, he wasn't. And I think that would have been, again, a more compelling story. But as with all of my corrections and improvements and suggestions I make to movies, I want to acknowledge that I am crafting and making these edits in a bubble with a pre-finished product. The people who made this were creating something from nothing, and that's a lot harder to do. Okay, maybe not strictly from nothing. There were obviously comics and other supporting material, but that's beside the point. The point is they create something brand new, and so I get how that would be challenging, and maybe not. It's not easy to see clearly how to write these characters the best way, or at least the way that I think is best. Because let's be real, this is just my opinion. Some people might like the fact that Yon-Rogg is very emotional and prefer that version of the story and think that this tells a more compelling story. And that's totally valid. Totally fine. So yeah, I like this suggestion. I wish they'd made this change, but it's not to say that the movie's terrible because they didn't make the change that I wanted, the vanilla nerd. But going back to the movie a little bit, I want to say I really liked the Kree Squad that she got to work with. They were an eclectic group of fun characters, and I like how they each had different weapons. It was clear that there was some thought put into their personalities and their characters more than what we got to see on screen, and I would have wished that they could have developed those characters a little bit more so that when she has to fight them, it just kind of comes off a little more personal because she, is fighting her friends from the last 6 years. I think that would have worked a little better, but again, there's only so much time in a movie, and the movie was great regardless. Next, I want to talk about Talos, the head scroll. He is played by an actor called Ben Mendelsohn, and that actor is so good. He just steals the show in every single scene he is in. He is so funny, and I just love him. I particularly enjoy the scene where he makes a truce with Captain Marvel, Nick Fury, and Maria Rambeau. And he says, okay, that one's on me. It's just, he's very funny, and I really enjoy his character in this movie. And finally, to round out the characters, I really like Maria Rambeau. Having her be Carol's best friend was a really fun addition to the story. And I love how her character has come back in future MCU projects. I won't spoil which ones or anything, but I do enjoy how she's coming back and hopefully gonna stick around a little longer. Hopefully. We'll see what happens. But as I mentioned in my conversation about the plot, I think Maria's best scene is when she tells Carol who she is, and she just helps give Carol that confidence boost that she needs. It's so powerful, very well done, and I really, really appreciate it. On top of that, it's really cool to see Maria fly the jet and prove that she's just as good of a fighter pilot, if not maybe a little better, than Carol Danvers, and that was very, very fun. But speaking of the jet, I just want to say that Captain Marvel was a really fun prequel. Unlike a lot of other prequels, I don't think it was bogged down too much by its attempt to connect so hard to the wider universe. It was still able to tell its own story, but it had enough little fun things connected to the wider MCU that were enjoyable for us fans of the MCU for a long time. For instance, seeing the origin of the Quinjet. This one's called the Quadjet in this movie, but it's clearly the predecessor and precursor to that plane that has made such a big splash in the MCU. Seeing the origins of Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. His cameo to return after who knows how many years was very fun and satisfying. Yes, I know he had his own little Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show, but that show has not connected to the wider MCU pretty much ever, so, here we are. But also you had the Tesseract show up in this movie once again, and I felt like that made a lot of sense. S.H.I.E.L.D. has had it since the end of World War II when Stark found it out of the ocean. And of course they'd be running experiments on it, more than just the stuff hinted at in Avengers 1. So I think it works really well to have that come back into play in this movie. And of course, I love Carol's call sign being Avenger, and that's what encourages Nick Fury to call it the Avenger Initiative, which was very fun and a fun little Easter egg. So overall, this movie was a really good prequel outside of the in continuity of Fury losing his eye and the line in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So there's that. So that kind of wraps up my review of this movie on its own, but I do want to address some of the controversy surrounding this film because I know there's quite a lot. And I'm not going to pretend like I know all of it or like I know all the reasons people have frustrations with this film, but I do want to address some of the bigger issues and why I don't have those same issues with Captain Marvel. So moving forward, there will be a few extra spoilers that I want to acknowledge. There will be some minor spoilers for Avengers 2 and Thor 3. If you haven't seen those movies, get out now. But otherwise, let's talk about some of the controversy surrounding Captain Marvel. So the first big problem that I know a lot of people have with Captain Marvel is how overpowered she is. It's no secret that in this movie, she never loses a battle. Technically, she gets captured and she loses track of one of the Skrulls at 2 separate instances. But outside of that, she never loses a straight up fight. Which is why the Skrulls are such good enemies for her, because they don't actually fight her directly. They disguise themselves and do all that, which is great. But for me, this never bothered me because this movie was never about power scaling. It was always about the inner conflict within Carol. Is she going to choose to embrace her humanity or suppress it? And until she decides, it's really hard for her to use the full extent of her powers. And that's what makes it interesting, and that's what makes this story compelling to me. I get that might not be compelling to other people. They might be frustrated that she never fights a battle where she goes up against a credible threat. Even when she goes up against 4 spaceships with giant alien missiles, she's able to stop all those alien missiles and punch a hole straight through a spaceship. Like, that's crazy. Very, very powerful. And that can bother a lot of people. That can get under their skin. But again, this movie was never about power scaling. There are other movies out there about power scaling. Avengers 2 comes to mind, with Iron Man having to face the Hulk, or Hawkeye having to go against a speedster, or Captain America fighting Ultron. And all of those things, there's the question asked, do these characters have enough power to beat the people they're going up against? Or Thor 3, another great example. Does Thor have enough power to stop Hela, his half-sister? Like, that is all interesting storytelling, and it works great for those movies. But that's not what this movie is built around. This movie is built around Carol's inner conflict, and that is what I like about this film. Now, does the power scaling cause problems for Carol in future stories down the line? Yeah, probably. Because she is so powerful, how does any challenge really stop her from winning? It's debatable, but we'll talk about that later. Next, I know another big problem people have is with the personality of Captain Marvel. She just gets on a lot of people's nerves, and this is in no small part due to the fact that the actress Brie Larson had a number of poorly worded interviews and poorly handled interviews surrounding the release of this movie and Avengers Endgame, which is unfortunate. But I'm not here to talk about those interviews or anything. I will simply say that as the movie presents Captain Marvel, I like her character. I like how she comes across. I like that she's plucky and kind of abrasive. I like how she has a smirk that would make any class clown jealous. I like how she's kind of emotionless in a lot of her reactions because for the last 6 years, she's been brainwashed to be emotionless. I think that works for the character. I like her personality, but I can understand how it would grate and get on people's nerves otherwise. So if that's your problem, I think it's valid. It's just not my problem, if that makes any sense. And the third thing that I know a lot of people are frustrated by, which is interrelated with both her personality and her overpowered nature, is the fact that Marvel, the MCU, introduced this character as the new most powerful character in the MCU. And she seemingly came out of nowhere. When compared with other heavy hitters like Thor or Wanda, who had years and multiple movies to establish their street cred, if you will, as the most powerful heroes, she just kind of gets one movie right before the ultimate movie, Endgame, to prove that she's the most powerful character. And it feels very jarring for a lot of people. And it really takes them out of the character. They don't want to root for her because she's stealing the show from their favorite character, Thor or Wanda or whomever. And I understand that. I can understand how that'd be frustrating. For me, I don't feel like she is more or less powerful than Thor or Wanda. I feel like she's just right up there. She has unique powers that are different from both of them, just as they have unique powers from each other. And so I think it still works, and I still like her character. Plus, if this review hasn't emphasized this enough, power scaling has never been my biggest problem with any character. I don't really care about it that much. Yes, I want my heroes to go up against credible threats, but it doesn't take much for me to believe that a credible threat is being achieved. Nor do I really need them to go up against enemies, real physical enemies, for it to be a compelling story. They can have internal conflict that makes it just as good. But again, I get for a lot of people, power scaling is a big deal, and it really takes them out of a movie when someone that they think should easily win a fight struggles in that fight. I get that. And so, if that's your issue, that's totally fine. It can be very frustrating that Marvel just decided to introduce this character seemingly out of the blue. But that's as much as I want to talk about the controversy. At the end of the day, I like Captain Marvel. I have enjoyed it more with each rewatch, and that is something I can't say about a whole lot of movies. I like Carol Danvers. I like her friendship and bond with Nick Fury. I like how they explain the origin of the Avengers in a lot of ways through this movie. It was very satisfying and very, very fun. So overall, Captain Marvel, I think it's a great movie. Maybe not the best or at the top of my MCU list, but definitely well above average in my opinion. And that's my review for this film.